The question is, how do you maintain your peak span, right? How do you get as close as you can? You're obviously not going to be your 100%, but how do you not drop below 90% of that peak, right?
Is that possible?
First of all, is it possible? And I would say for some organs, no. Which organs are that? I don't think a reproductive life expectancy for a female, I don't think you're going to be having babies at 80 years old without actual medical intervention. But that's a whole other conversation. So but I do think there are ways that we can get really close to our peak for cardiorespiratory, for musculoskeletal, for our intelligence, cognitive intelligence, as well as our immune system. And I think there are blanket things that we could do that affect multiple systems, right? And there's also targeted things. So we were talking about fluid versus cognitive versus crystallized intelligence, right? Obviously, crystallized intelligence, it doesn't peak until mid-40s. The things that you can do to improve crystallized intelligence also improve your fluid intelligence. What are those things? One, exercise, number one thing. Aerobic exercise is increasing brain-derived neurotrophic factor, very important for both these aspects. It's also, growing new neurons, making connections between the neurons, making your brain more plastic and adaptable so it adapts to the changing environment. Top thing that you can do. Another thing that you can do that's really important for brain aging is the omega-3. We talked about that. Really important for brain aging. But the other thing that you can do is what we're doing right now, engaging in novel cognitive, experiences. It could be a discussion. It could be your work. If you are learning new things, novel is key here, novel. If you are learning new things, you are going to really help yourself improve both your fluid and crystallized intelligence. And so,
is that because you're raising your potential, i.e., so you're falling from a higher place as you decline? Because I was thinking about this, how much of this has got to do with making sure that I peak at a higher place?
Right. Yeah. I think that maybe has something to do with it. But in addition, there's neurochemical things that are changing when you're learning new experiences. For one, you are increasing brain-derived neurotrophic factor and stuff as well, because novelty does that. You're also glutamate, and you're having, glutamate being activated as well. But I think the cognitive reserve is what you're talking about, and that is really important, right? Because you need to have that reserve if you're going to start pulling from it, and that also comes with muscle health, right? Muscle and bone. So those are peaking around the same times, 25 or so. Peak muscle mass generally occurs around the age of 25. There are things that you can do to keep close to that peak though, right? And that would be resistance training, big one. Strength training. Strength goes down. This is something, protein intake, right?
Avoid the black plastics in my fridge.
Avoid black plastics in your fridge, yeah.
Because then my testosterone's going to go down.
Testosterone's going to go down, and that's going to affect your ability to gain muscle mass. Exactly. A lot of these healthy lifestyles that we're talking about are multi-system targeting, right? So you're targeting, but key would be strength training and resistance training, and it's going to also affect your bones. So you're going to want to do these weight-bearing exercises that are multi-joint, the compound lifts, right? The deadlifts, rows, things like that. Those are very important to help maintain that peak. Immune system, sleep, very, very important for maintaining a healthy immune system and preventing your immune system from aging rapidly. So making sure you're prioritizing sleep. How are you going to do that, right? There's a lot of ways to a lot of people have sleep problems, and they have sleep problems for different reasons, and there's ways to target them. But just realize thinking about it and prioritizing is important for your immune system and for your brain. Also, the exercise plays a role in your cardiorespiratory fitness, the brain, everything, muscle. So cardiorespiratory fitness is something that we talked about urolithin A, helping improve it on top of exercise. So there's supplements and stuff that you add in as well. But this idea here is really that we can do things in our life that are healthy to help maintain that peak span, to get us not just free of disease, but close to what we were peaking. And I do think it's possible. We talked last time I was here, we talked about that study. You exercise 5 hours a week, do some high intensity interval training in there, and you can reverse heart aging by 20 years. That's incredible.
It's crazy. Right? It's so crazy.
So,
and you're also saying that listening to the Diary of a CEO obviously is therefore good for...
Yeah, it's good for cognitive, your fluid intelligence and your crystallized intelligence. It's good for learning new things, right? That's...
So you would prescribe it?
Yeah, yeah. Especially the episodes I'm on.
No, I say that as a joke, but actually it's a part of the conversation we had the other day at dinner was, I don't think I'm going to appreciate, maybe until later in my life, how much an unintended consequence of doing this as a job had on my cognition and my brain. And it's like not something that I would notice, in the moment, but over time, doing this 2 times a week for sometimes 8 hours a week, learning something new, being forced is a strong word, but having an obligation to learn something new for 8 hours a week for my entire adult life.
It's great. I mean, it's one of the best things that you can do for your brain. That's why learning a new language is associated with a rapid, decrease in Alzheimer's disease risk. You're working your brain. You're learning new things. It's so important. One of the worst things that someone can do is retire and just sit and watch TV, right? I mean, that's like the worst thing. You're rapidly gonna decline and get dementia.
We've got to talk about AI in this conversation.
Oh my gosh.
Because I actually woke up this morning and I got a message. Look, I'll check with him that I can put this in before I say it out loud, before it's published. But I got a message from my chairman, Nicky. Nicky's an incredible man. He's, 25 years Boston Consulting Group. He's seen it all. And he said to me that one of the things he's thinking a lot about at the moment is how across our, businesses, but just generally in society, how AI is going to impact critical thinking and what that then might mean for our teams, our executives, etc. So this is a conversation I was having this morning with him. And it's also something I've noticed. There are certain people I interact with now where I do not feel at all like I'm dealing with their brain. I feel like I'm dealing with what came out the other end of a ChatGPT prompt.
Yes.
Good, bad, indifferent. Like, I don't,
Yeah, it's an interesting and important question, Stephen, because I've been thinking a lot about what with AI, it's changing so much. And the question is, like, do you focus on, the negative parts and the short-term parts? Do you focus on the potential benefits that could be great and grand? And I do think a lot of it is people are worried about things like, oh, AI is going to take all of our jobs. Oh, we're going to have brain rot because we don't use our brains anymore. And those are concerns to have, but there's also a lot of exciting things to think about. I also worry about the brain rot part where it's like, well, okay, these people aren't critically thinking for themselves. I've seen I can spot AI a million miles away, right? And part of it is if AI is accurate and people are more easily accessing the accurate information and they're learning it, that's great. Like, that's what it's supposed to be there for, right?
I think that's a big if, right?
If. And it does have a lot to do with the version of AI you're using. It has a lot to do with the prompt. It has a lot to do with the question, how much, reasoning it has to do. I mean, it's still evolving, but I agree. It's kind of like the worry is, are we going to have a generation of people growing up that don't know how to critically think?
You've heard about that London taxi driver test experiment. I think I've heard you talk about it before, actually.
Yeah. I mean, well, they have these maps in their heads, right? I mean, you have these taxi drivers in London that they don't use GPS. Like, they know everywhere to go. By the way, I was in London a couple of years ago. I love the taxi drivers there. They are so awesome. They're just different. They're totally different than...
For anyone that doesn't know, and I'm absolutely going to butcher this, to become a London taxi driver, you have to take a test for many, many years. You have to learn for many, many years. And you have to learn like every street across London from the top of your head without using GPS.
That's incredible.
So yeah, when you get in a black cab in London, it's amazing. You can go, I kind of want to go to, and they go, got ya.
They know everywhere.
Yeah.
They have maps in their brain. I mean, think about the cognitive reserve they have. Think about all the things they learned and the spatial memory and all that. And do these guys ever get Alzheimer's disease? I don't know that they do. I mean, there's studies out there showing that these types of taxi drivers do not get Alzheimer's disease.
They have to learn 25,000 streets, and it's called the knowledge. And they have physically larger hippocampus centers in their brain, which is the memory center.
And I like to extrapolate, if I may, and think that all this cognitive learning that I do daily and that you're doing by talking to guests from all sorts of fields is also you're learning things. Right? It's not just you're interested in things and you're learning them. And it really is also a type of brain exercise. And so I think that this is ultimately what we were getting to is basically, we're going to talk about AI because I know we got to get there, but is essentially if you can engage in intellectual types of activities or anything that's going to exercise your brain, whether it's learning the map of London or it's learning about mitophagy, whatever it is, it's really good to engage in that novel learning. It's really good for your brain. It's working your brain out.
I've been thinking a lot about this. I've just come back from South by Southwest and every conversation was about bloody AI.
I was there too.
Oh, really? They were asking me a lot about AI. So before I went on stage, I was looking at some of the studies and I concluded that at the moment we are in society, there's going to be a bit of a bifurcation of people. One group is going to take the path of least resistance with AI, which is they're going to defer their thinking to AI, which is, one of the things I learn from people like you often is that if you don't use it, you lose it. And that part of their brain, whatever it is, will begin to atrophy to some extent. And I think there'll be another group of people who will, just like we go to the gym now because we have to, because our lives are so easy, they will go to like the mental gym, which means they will set aside time to intentionally solve difficult cognitive problems or challenges. And I literally have said to some of my executives, we'll have a moment where we're talking on WhatsApp or Slack, and I'll literally say, let's try and solve this problem with our brains. Because I believe that solving this problem with our brains will create a deeper understanding of the first principles of the problem, not the just surface level 1 + 1 = 2, but like, what is 1? Mm-hmm. What is a number? And this is the difference. Like AI can give you the answer, but it's not going to give you the foundation so that you can solve other problems in the future. Because if I never told you what the number 1 was, you would never in the future be able to use it yourself. All you'd know is 1 + 1 = 2. But there's foundations, like what are numbers, what is 1, what is 2, what is plus, that you need to understand to be able to do 1 + 2 = 3. And one of the studies I looked at, which has been heavily discussed, was from last year. And it found staggering memory cost using generative AI. In the study, which I'll throw up on the screen, 83% of AI users were unable to remember the details of a passage of text that they had written with AI's assistance. EEG scans showed that brain connectivity was almost halved when individuals outsourced their thinking to AI compared to writing manually, which created cognitive debt. You get output faster, but you don't build the long-term neural hardware to understand the information or the knowledge.
So true. It's so true. What's interesting about what you just said is when you're writing something, whether you're typing it or even actually I think there's been some studies on this, like handwriting something, something about handwriting it really ingrains it into your memory. And I have this process when I'm there's a lot of facts that I have to remember when I'm talking about them. And I have this process that I do. And the first one is the research, right? You research it and you find it. And then I type it in a Google Doc. Mm-hmm. And then I write it. And that process is really what gets it into my memory. All the statistics and, statistics are always harder because it's just a number, versus like you're saying, you're understanding the fundamental nature of something that I'm interested in. That always helps. And so it's interesting that if you're writing something, if you're writing it, like typing it or writing it, handwriting, they're probably talking about typing it. Even that really does help you remember something. If you're just copying it and then trying to do some recall, it's not gonna work. And then there's the whole other layer of that you were talking about, which is like you're not even using, the novelty isn't there. You're not like really into it and learning. And that's what it really takes to build that cognitive reserve, to improve the connections, to increase brain-derived neurotrophic factor, right? You need that novelty. So I do love AI, but I also know that I need to continue using my brain, and I have my own protocols that I like and that I still do. I still write things down. I have my little notebook, and before I go on a podcast too, I like to go through and write stuff down that I've already typed, that I've learned, and things I wanted to cover. It really makes a difference in memory. So for people that are like you and I, and learners and optimizers, take that pointer, because it really does work.
This was one of my favorite things with the iPad. Listen, I'm not the type of person that does a huge amount of writing on pen and paper, although I would do more because everything you've said has proven to be true for me. If I write something down, it's like I'm writing it directly into my brain.
Right.
But the iPad now allows you to split what you're reading in terms of a book on one side and then a notepad on the other. So what I do when I read is I read the thing, And then I try and write out the lesson on the other side of the page. So I'll say, the gut microbiome has 42 trillion bugs. And I'll go, the gut microbiome has 42 million bugs.
I love it.
And then I turn the page and I'm trying to do exactly what you said, because I realize that a lot of stuff I learn doesn't land unless I write it out myself.
It's something about the act of writing. Mm-hmm. And if you add the layer of like what I do, it takes time. So you have to type it and then write. Then it really sticks in your brain. Yeah. Like those are the ones those are the ones that really have stuck if I've done them both. But I love that. I don't use iPads ever. And I still like read books, like old books. And when I have time to do them, and I just have my notebook.
I think it shows though. You have an unbelievable ability to remember so many things.
But I still love AI. I think there's a lot of benefits. And I think that, scientists in general are using AI is now their collaborator, right? Mm. They're pretty smart collaborator that has access to a lot of data and can analyze a lot of data quickly.
What are your thoughts on exercise and the current suggestions and recommendations around exercise?
Well, I'm glad you asked this question. I think I've been thinking about this a lot. I did a podcast on the current exercise guidelines, and I think they need to be updated. I think they're not good enough. And it's important for people to realize how these exercise guidelines were formulated and what they mean. So typically you'll hear exercise guidelines, 150 to 300 minutes a week of moderate intensity exercise is good for optimal health, or 75 minutes to 150 minutes a week of vigorous intensity exercise, right? So they're basically a 2-to-1 ratio, right? Twice as many minutes for moderate intensity as vigorous intensity. What is defined as moderate versus vigorous? That's also important because it's different across different studies. In these guidelines, it's basically moderate intensity is you're walking. You're moving with intent, but not really, really fast. You're walking at maybe a fast pace, but you're not jogging and you're not running. That kind of activity would be considered moderate. Vigorous would be considered jogging, running, swimming, cycling. So the kind of activity where you're actually moving fast with intent. Why do we have this 2-to-1 ratio? Where did it come from? Well, it all came from energy expenditure. You burn twice as many calories if you're doing vigorous intensity exercise as you do if you're doing moderate intensity, right? So if you're walking 1 mile, you'll burn X amount of calories. If you jog that mile, you'll burn twice as many calories. That's where these guidelines came from, the 2-to-1 ratio, right? Weight loss, energy expenditure. But that's not necessarily what's important for reducing cancer mortality, reducing cardiovascular related mortality, reducing all-cause mortality, right? These guidelines use that data, this 2-to-1 ratio of energy expenditure, and then they looked at other studies and said, okay, how much exercise is required to reduce cardiovascular-related mortality or all-cause mortality? And they kind of like connected the dots. By the way, these studies also were using questionnaires. They weren't actually measuring how active people were. A new study came out, and I did a Journal Club podcast on it because it was a study that I felt was so important that I wanted to break down all the components of the study with another scientist and talk about them because it's very important. So journal clubs, typically in science, you have them. In my career, it was, sometimes it was once a week. Other times it was once a month. And so when you choose a study that's important and you break it down and you talk about the results and you talk about the methods and talk about what the findings mean. That's what a journal club is. And it's essentially you choose a journal and a publication within that journal. And it's a club. You have different scientists that are talking about it.
Why did this warrant a journal club?
Because I think this study basically is strong enough data that it's implying we need to change our exercise guidelines, at least the messaging of them at the very least. And I'll tell you why. Because I talked about these guidelines, how they're formulated. They're using questionnaires. They're not measuring anything. Well, a new study came out. Not only did it measure physical activity through these accelerometers, it was able to measure how active people were and the type of activity, whether it was, I mentioned moderate versus vigorous. They also measured light physical activity. That would be considered walking around your house, kind of doing that kind of light activity, not necessarily going for a walk or going for a run. And they looked at deaths from different causes of disease. They looked at deaths from all causes, so all-cause mortality. They looked at cancer-related deaths. They looked at cardiovascular-related deaths. They looked at type 2 diabetes. They looked at heart attacks, right? And what was so profound was that what they found, and what we now know is that everything changes in terms of how important vigorous intensity exercise is. It's so much more valuable than we thought. It's not 2 to 1. So if we're looking at all-cause mortality, dying from all causes, cancer, respiratory, anything related that's non-accidental, for every 1 minute of vigorous intensity exercise, you had to do 4 minutes of moderate intensity, and you had to do like 100 to 150 minutes of light exercise to get the same reduction in all-cause mortality.
For every 1 minute?
For every 1 minute of vigorous intensity exercise. It gets better, okay? For every 1 minute of vigorous intensity exercise to reduce your death from cardiovascular disease, you had to do 8 minutes of moderate intensity and 200 minutes of light exercise for every 1 minute of vigorous intensity exercise. It's huge. To reduce your type 2 diabetes risks, for every 1 minute of vigorous, you had to do 10 minutes of moderate intensity, or you had to do, again, you're in the 150 minutes to 200 minutes of light exercise. To reduce your risk of dying from cancer, for every 1 minute of vigorous intensity exercise, you had to do 4 minutes, about 4 minutes of moderate intensity. And for light, it was like, it was almost not even happening. I mean, it was like 250, 300, like you had to just, a ton of minutes, unbelievable amount of minutes, okay? The value of vigorous intensity exercise is so much more than this 2 to 1 ratio based on energy expenditure, based on burning calories that our guidelines were based on. It's time to rethink them. It's time to tell people, hey, if you're getting out and you're going for a run, it is worth way more than you think it is in terms of reducing your disease risk and your death from that disease, right? Also, what was really interesting about this study, and this goes back to this exercise snacks that we talked about before last episode, is that because participants were wearing these accelerometers on their wrist, they were able to measure all physical activity. Let's say you have a new puppy and you're sprinting in the yard and playing with them for a minute or 2 minutes or 3 minutes or whatever, not 30 minutes in the gym, right? Or not 30 minutes on the treadmill, but you're just a short burst. Or you're playing with your grandkids or your kids and you're playing tag, whatever. Those moments count. They really add up. And that is also a take home from this study and other studies, is that you can actually get massive benefits from the sprinting, the vigorous exercise, 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Women that did 3.5 minutes of just this vigorous types of exercise per day lowered their cancer risk by 40%.
If you love the Diary of a CEO brand and you watch this channel, please do me a huge favor. Become part of the 15% of the viewers on this channel that have hit the subscribe button. It helps us tremendously, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the guests.